Investigators are looking coast to coast to find clues on the bombs sent to prominent Democrats across the country. At least 10 devices were sent to 2 former presidents and notable Trump critics. Law enforcement sources tell CBS News at least some packages may have been mailed from Florida. CBS News Justice and Homeland Security correspondent Jeff Begays is following the investigation.
Sources tell CBS News investigators are zeroing in on postal facilities in South Florida where they believe at least some of the packages were mailed. They're going through security camera footage, including of the self-serve kiosks where packages can be mailed, looking to find the person who sent the package bombs. All arrows pointing to Florida, one federal official told CBS News. The Florida office address of Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz was listed as the return address of all the packages sent. This morning in Delaware, officials found 2 package bombs addressed to former Vice President Joe Biden. And before dawn, the New York Police Department found 1 bomb addressed to Robert De Niro at his production company in the Tribeca neighborhood. The tip came from a retired New York police detective who was working in De Niro's office. New York Police Commissioner James ONeill.
The NYPD and the FBI, we're taking this seriously. We are treating them as live devices.
Overnight in Los Angeles, police found a 2nd bomb addressed to Democratic Congresswoman Maxine Waters. That was on top of 6 bombs discovered so far. All of the recipients had been criticized by President Trump, and many were critical of him. Last night in Wisconsin, the president said the media was partly to blame.
The media also has a responsibility to set a civil tone and to stop the endless hostility and constant negative and oftentimes false attacks.
Former CIA Director John Brennan, who had a package sent to him at CNN's New York office yesterday, addressed the president in a tweet saying, "Clean up your act, try to act presidential." Investigators acknowledge there is likely a political message behind the bombs.
This is domestic terrorism.
Jerome Hauer, a former Homeland Security chief for New York, said even if the bombs were not meant to detonate, they made their point.
My sense of it is they're crude. They were not supposed to explode, but he's trying to terrorize people by sending something that looks absolutely real.
Officials say all 10 packages look similar, and the devices themselves were made to look like active bombs. They're now being examined at the FBI's high-tech bomb laboratory in Quantico, Virginia. David Chipman, who spent 25 years at the ATF, said the FBI will have plenty of evidence to look through. We're hearing that there was a timing device as part of it, a digital clock that was connected to a small battery. What does that tell you?
It tells me there's a lot of leads now because we've got like 9, 10 devices now recovered. A typical person doesn't buy 10 digital clocks at one time. And so that's good for law enforcement. That would raise, attention to a store owner.
Postal inspectors have spent days pouring through millions of pieces of mail looking for similar packages. Philip Bartlett is the lead postal inspector in New York.
I will say, in the postal network, we have found nothing in the last 8 hours. So what we have so far is what we have, 10 parcels.
MiamiDade police say they are assisting the FBI in the search of that facility near Miami, close to the district, represented by Debbie Wasserman Schultz. But investigators caution that they are checking out other facilities as well. All of this means that investigators are getting closer to figuring out who may be responsible. Tanya.
Jeff Begays, thank you. Joining me now to discuss the investigation is Mike ONeill. He's a former commanding officer for the NYPD counterterrorism unit. Mike, really great to have you here with us. What are law enforcement officers focusing on at this moment?
Right now, they're obviously trying to track down the suspect. I think there's been a tremendous amount of evidence actually probably uncovered from a couple of days ago to today, from the packaging itself to the pipe bomb itself, the technical assessment, any evidence they got to offer each or both of those issues, whether the package or the pipe bomb, and not to mention kind of where that takes them, in the investigative process.
We heard some noise today about perhaps some of these packages coming from Florida. Yeah. Looking at that package that we saw pictures of in the news, and the tape and the stamps, do you look at that as an investigator and you say that's a trove of forensic evidence right there? There could be DNA on the back of that adhesive tape, on those stamps maybe maybe there's saliva.
Absolutely. Both, actually, the package and the pipe bomb itself. And I would separate the two. The technical assessment of the pipe bomb, how it's construction, tells you the story about who the bomber might be. But also there's evidence on there as well, like latent prints, some trace evidence, and you got to take it the bomb. And then the package, you kind of look at the same way. The description of it, the postmarks, all that type of stuff, is a latent prints or trace evidence on that as well.
Do we know if there were any missives or notes inside any of these packages?
Not that I'm aware of. What you typically find in a case like this, when they identify a person, there'll be some type of profile, most likely a social media profile, I would assume anyway,
right.
on something like
investigators are probably keeping many things out of the public eye, correct? So there's a lot going on here that we don't know about.
I like to tell people there's things that are probably happening that we shouldn't know, right? Because they'll show to find a suspect. And I'll give an example, and it just doesn't mean it's happening. For all we know, there's some great CCTV or camera footage that they captured at multiple spots that might tell you something about this person. Tips. This has been widely spread now. And sometimes this doesn't happen in a vacuum, and they take those serious. Like, hey, I saw a guy buy something like this, or a neighbor, or something like that. So hopefully that is happening, and our investigators are.
And Mike, we can definitively call this domestic terrorism, correct?
Yeah, I think it fits the definition clearly. I mean, I don't think the way I see the definition of terrorism is it's motivated by some type of ideology, whether it be religious, political, or government.
And you seek to inflict random harm on citizens,
people.
right?
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, whatever the motivation here, it's random harm on people. I think there's some political ideology here. I think a lot of people think that.
Right.
But there's no question about it. And I think that's why, to the government's credit, the lead agency right now is a joint terrorist task force.
Right.
So that should tell you something.
That is great. Now, are there any things that the U.S. Postal Service could do to neutralize events like this in the future?
It's very hard, as you can imagine, tremendous volume. I knew about this when I was the CO of counterterrorism. We were really concerned about the anthrax threats. They really have a robust system on that now, post 9/11. Very hard on explosive. It doesn't happen in the U.S. Postal Service, unfortunately. I think you see that now. You see that these devices can be mailed. It's happened before, the Texas case.
I'm glad that you brought up the anthrax threat, because there was at least one package that contained white powder, we were told. Do we know yet whether that white powder was determined to be benign?
Well, what I do know is I believe that was at the Time Warner case.
Yes.
And I know a lot about that procedure, the white powder protocol. If that was the case, a sample would have been taken by the NYPD, and in conjunction with the Department of Health, it would have been tested by the New York City Department of Health. By now, we would have known the results. I think if it was something like that, you would have heard.
We would have heard, right? They would have definitely. Law enforcement is keeping some things under wraps, but anything
something like that's a serious health emergency.
Right.
You have to take care of people, whoever might have been exposed to it.
Right.
You're not going to keep something like that under wraps.
So, what are the immediate next steps in this investigation, Mike?
And next, I think, is happening, and the stuff we don't know. But I know the units involved, particularly joint terror, I'm very familiar with. They are the best and the brightest that the NYPD and the FBI have to offer. Americans should be happy they're on this. And I do believe that they will find this individual.
So are we talking about days, weeks, months?
I hope so. I'll tell you why. Because, one, it's a bad action. We need to get someone like this in custody. But also, the longer something like this stays out there, you could be empowering this individual. The device design was crude. It wouldn't have went off, I could tell you that. But was that done intentionally, or was it a poor bomb maker? What was the real motivation here? To get attention, to cause disruption, to cause fear? And if that was the case, that's happening. My point is, the longer someone stays out there not apprehended, they could be empowered and think about doing another round of these. That's unfortunate, but that's what law enforcement gets worried about.
And that's why the speed is needed.
Speed, very careful. I don't want to think people are being careless, but they understand the urgency for a lot of reasons.
Mike ONeill, former NYPD, we really appreciate you sharing your expertise with us.
Yeah, thank you.